Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our 30 on Thursday webinar, an introduction to administering your Office 365 tenant. Just a little bit about us before we get started. Protiviti is a global consulting firm that serves more than 40% of Fortune 1000 and Fortune Global 500 companies. We are a full-service enterprise content management team and have helped hundreds of clients realize the value of SharePoint and Office 365. Our 30 on Thursday webinar series is now in its 5th year. We do a 30-minute webinar every other Thursday, and we talk all things SharePoint, Office 365, and enterprise content management. Our next webinar will be on December 1st, where we will be talking about sharpening your insights with the new Nintex Hawkeye business solution. You can register for this webinar and see our full event schedule on our website. Just a little bit about our Office 365 solutions. Our enterprise content management team have a lot of experience in migration and planning, security and governance strategies, and hybrid solutions for Office 365. We also provide on-demand support packages, and we help your organization utilize all of Office 365 features, including Groups, Power BI, Delve, Planner, and much more. If you're interested in learning more about our Office 365 solutions and support, you can check out our website, ecm.protiviti.com. Today's session is being recorded. You can access the recording of today's session and see past webinar recordings on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ProtivitiSP. For questions during today's presentation, please insert them in the question window of the GoToMeeting toolbar or live tweet us your questions using the hashtag 30T0365. We will be answering all the questions after Doug's presentation today. Today's presenter is Doug Hemminger, 3-time SharePoint MVP here at Protiviti, and I am Julia Marple, and I will be moderating today's session. All right, Doug, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can take it from there.
All right, thanks, Julia. As she mentioned, my name is Doug Hemminger, and I'm a 3-time SharePoint MVP. And today we're going to be talking about an introduction to administering your Office 365 tenant. I do have a couple of slides, but most of it is actually going to be live demo from an Office 365 tenant, so we'll be doing hands-on walking through the site itself. Our agenda is we're going to first talk a little bit about what are the administration roles available to you in Office 365. I'm going to give an Office 365 administration console overview. We're going to cover user management and then also group management. And our topics today are by no means a comprehensive walkthrough of what's available and how to administer Office 365. It's just an introduction, but hopefully it'll give you some background on how to administer your tenant and at least get you started. So first I wanted to walk through some of the administration roles. The first role is an Office 365 is just a user, someone who actually uses the site. They would not have any access to the administrative functions in Office 365 that we're going to walk through today. The second role is the global administrator. They are the sort of the super administrator. They have administrative access to everything. My account that I'm going to be walking through the administrative site today is a global administrator and does have access to everything. There is a billing administrator role, which allows the administrator to make purchases, manage subscriptions, and also handle support tickets and monitor the overall health of the system. There's several administrators that are specific to some of the operations in Office 365, including Exchange, SharePoint, and Skype. So each of those have their own administrative roles. So you may have, for example, in your organization, certain administrators that are designated specifically for each of those areas. So they may administer just SharePoint or Exchange or Skype for Business. There's also a password administrator role that this person would be responsible for resetting passwords and helping to manage service requests. There's also a service administrator and a user management administrator. So all of these roles are available as administrative roles within Office 365, and that way you can delegate some of the tasks, the administrative tasks, out to different users without necessarily giving them access to the entire administrative site. So one thing I do want to point out is that I do have screenshots in all my slides of everything that I'm doing and walking through, but we're not actually going to walk through the slides. I may bounce back and forth a little bit, but for the most part, we're going to be on an actual site. So I'm going to start by going into the Office 365 Administration Center, Admin Center. I'm actually on it right now, but just to show you how I got here, from anywhere within Office 365, you can click the waffle icon in the upper left-hand corner. And if you are an administrator, there will be an admin tile in your section. You'll note that my my app menu actually may look a little bit different than yours because it's the latest release version. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but if you are on a first release tenant, you may get some features before the rest of the users. And in this case, I'm on a first release tenant, and I have this app icon before everybody else. So yours may look a little bit different, but generally you'll have an admin icon that looks just like this. So if I click the admin icon, it takes me to the Admin Center. And the Admin Center, the homepage of the Admin Center shows you several tiles that are meant to be convenient ways to access various functions and features within the Admin Center. And you can modify these tiles and the layout of these tiles as you see fit to suit your purposes. So for example, if I want to edit this page, I just click Edit this page, and I can add a card and then save it if I want to. So they have some preset cards here. For example, there's only 2 left that I haven't added. One is the recently added, and then the other one is the setup guide. But otherwise, I've added them all to my layout already. I can also move them around if I want some in a different order or to change that up. So looking at the cards, you'll see that I've got one that's dedicated towards users, and there's some quick links to functions that are commonly used, including adding a user, deleting a user, editing a user, and resetting a password. Another one that may be important is just some of the reporting capabilities, including the number of active users and how they're accessing the site across the system. All right, so from there, I'm going to jump actually down to the settings section. And we're going to walk through each of the different settings in the settings section. The left-hand side of the menu groups the different capabilities of the Admin Center into areas that you may need to use. So the services and add-ins actually stores a lot of different capabilities that you will be tweaking for your environment. One thing that you want to keep in mind, if you're not already on Office 365 or you just got there, some of the features and capabilities of Office 365 can be a little bit overwhelming, and by default, a lot of them are turned on. What I often recommend to clients that are just rolling out Office 365 is do sort of a phased approach where you turn on certain things. You don't throw everything out there at once, but maybe turn on things a little bit at a time. So you don't have everything turned on all right from the start. And I'll point out some things that you may want to hold off on a little bit, or maybe have a controlled rollout of in just a minute. So the first one here is multi-factor authentication. From this section, you can manage whether or not your users are required to use multi-factor authentication. If you're not familiar with multi-factor authentication, basically what this does is it has the standard challenge, password challenge that you would normally have, but it also adds one other step in order to enable you to log in. And this one other step that often is a text to a cell phone, for example. So if you have multi-factor authentication enabled for a particular user, you may have to not only enter a password, but also enter a code received via text on a cell phone. And normally what I recommend is that you enable it for administrators who have powerful rights to the system, if you're not going to necessarily enable it for everyone. So you'll see here that most of the people on this site is just a test site, have it disabled. But if I wanted to enable it for someone, I could force it. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. I could force it to enable them for them. A lot of these features also have to do with what you can share publicly, and it's a very important security consideration for your organization. So for example, on the calendar settings, under services and add-ins, it's actually going to give me the option to designate whether or not users are allowed to share their calendars externally. And by externally, I mean people who don't have the ability to log into your tenant. So they could be people who have an Office 365 login for maybe another tenant, but they don't have the ability to log into your tenant. So there's a couple of settings here. So the first one is let your users share their calendars with external users who have an Office 365 or Exchange account, and that's turned on. So you can turn that off if you want to. And the second option is to allow your users to share calendars with really anyone, even anonymous users who don't have a login to Office 365 at all. And then you can even specify what type of information they're allowed to share, whether they're allowed to share just free busy time, or more about the subject and location, or just all the information. So like I said, a lot of these have to do with security and rights and what you're allowing users to share externally outside your organization. Directory synchronization, I don't have this hooked up for this tenant, but what this would do is give you a status of your directory synchronization, when it's last synced, how often it syncs, and so on. Integrated apps is another thing that says whether the people in your organization are allowed to load third-party apps that can access their Office 365 information. So, if you use Nintax or AppPoint or some other third-party product, I'm not really sure what you might use, but if you had another third-party product that you wanted to disallow users from giving that product the ability to access their information, you could do it here. Mail, a lot of this information for mail is also available in the Security Center, but this has to do with custom mail rules, as well as all the malware policies, the spam filters, and if you set up any DLP policies. We're not going to go into a lot of these, since these are a little bit more complex topics and involve some more detailed settings that we don't have time for today, but know that mail settings can be accessed from here. Teams is a new feature that was just rolled out a couple weeks ago. It's basically a chatting feature that is integrated with groups and some other capabilities in Office 365. You can turn this off for your tenants or on for your tenants right here. So you can turn off the capability entirely. And then if you've got it on, you can control some of the different settings for the teams if you want to. Office 365 groups can be controlled a little bit here. You can't turn it on or off for your tenant entirely here. You have to do that through PowerShell. However, you can control whether users are allowed to, users outside your organization are allowed to access Office 365 groups, and whether people can add to those groups people from outside your organization. You can also turn on or off the Office Store here. So if you wanted people to not be able to access the Office Store, you can turn it off here. And you can also control whether or not people are allowed to share sites externally outside of your organization. And by sites, these are SharePoint sites. So if you don't want people sharing your sites externally, you can control that here. And that's a global setting for your entire organization, your entire tenant. So if you turn it off there, that means no sites anywhere within your tenant will be allowed to be shared externally. And I'm going to show you in just a second how you can control that on a site-by-site basis instead of globally, but you can set it globally as well. And then the last two, actually, I'm going to Skype for Business is also the external sharing, whether or not people outside your organization are allowed to message or use or interact with your internal users via Skype for Business. And then the last one is Sway, whether you want to turn that on or off for your organization. And if you have it on, then what content sources are you going to let them use? For example, Twitter or YouTube, can they use those content sources inside their Sways? Okay, I've kind of cruised through all the services and add-ins here. I'm actually going to go now to the security and privacy section, which just contains a couple of different settings. One is the password policy, which sets how long users have until their passwords expire, the sharing policy, and whether people can reset their own passwords. And I'm going to skip over a couple of sections here, and actually I just want to cover the organization profile and talk a little bit about the release preferences. So release preferences specify the rollout strategy of new features and capabilities in Office 365. You can see that for this tenant, we have it set as first release for everyone. Microsoft generally does things in two phases, either first release or general release, and they're usually separated by a few weeks or a month or so. But what happens with first release is that when a new feature or function becomes available, they'll roll it out first to the first release people, anyone who's selected to be first release within their tenant through this setting. And then a few weeks later, they'll roll it out to everyone. And you can see that for first release, you can have first release for everyone or just for a few select users. Generally, it's recommended that you have a core set of users either from quality assurance or maybe your IT area or your administrators who are set up for your first release candidates so that they know what's coming. But it's generally not recommended that you have first release for everyone. In this case, it's just a demo tenant, so we have it turned on for everyone. But normally you would just turn that on for a few select users and so that they can test out new capabilities and make sure that it's communicated appropriately when it's rolled out more broadly. In this section, you can also set up your themes, which include your logo, coloring, background images, things like that. And this would apply across all Office 365 sites, including Exchange and SharePoint and Skype for Business and OneDrive for Business and so on. You can also add custom tiles, which is basically just a picture with a URL. So you've got an image URL that shows the picture for the tile. You've got a URL that links to the actual whatever you want to link it to. And then we've got a name and a description, so you can add custom tiles here as well. All right. So I want to cover quickly user management. And I realize I'm going kind of fast here, but there's a lot to cover, so I'm intentionally doing that so we can get through as much as possible. Under the user section up here, you can see that there's a section called active users. From here, you can administer your users. You can, under the More tab at the top here, there's an Add a User, which is like the most common thing, but you can also click More and do a few other things, including import multiple users, delete a user, reset a password, or check on your directory synchronization. One of the things that you'll also want to know how to do is that when you click on a user, it brings up information about that user, including their name, their email addresses, but more importantly, it includes their product licenses. And one of the things that you can do for your organization is turn off features for certain groups of people through their product license. So you'll see, for example, that I have an Office 365 Enterprise E3 license and it's turned on. But if I expand this section, I see all that goes into that, including Planner, Sway, Office 365 Pro Plus, Office Online, SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and so on. And I can turn these off one by one for certain people. Or if I wanted to, I could actually create a PowerShell script that isolated a group of people or a large group of people and just run the PowerShell script on those people to either turn features on or turn them off. So this is one way to control what features are available for certain people or certain groups of people within your organization. To that end, I just wanted to show you kind of what that looks like. PowerShell is actually very simple to set up for your tenant. Really, all you do is you install this Microsoft Online Services Sign-In Assistant and the Azure Active Directory module for PowerShell. And you have to be a global administrator role in order to do this, but if you are a global administrator role, you just run a PowerShell window as administrator. You run this command called connect.microsoft online service, and then it'll prompt you for a username and password. You enter your administrator's password for your Office 365 tenant, and then from there you can run a set of PowerShell commands. And I'm actually just going to run a couple of them for you here. I've got a couple preloaded. So I could run this one called get Microsoft Online User to get all of the users on my tenant. I've already signed into my PowerShell my tenant here, so I'm just going to get all the users. And it's actually just going to spit back to me the username, the display name, and whether they're licensed or not. And this, as you can imagine, is pretty powerful because you can get pretty creative with your PowerShell scripts to automate some things. I could, for example, get only the unlicensed users. And I'm just going to run that command here. And this shows me the username, the display name, and is licensed for just the unlicensed users. But then I could even carry it a step further, and I'm not actually going to run this. Actually, I could run this one, but you can then pipe that into a command to turn on licensing for those people. So you can use PowerShell to administer your environment, including your users, pretty easily. All right, we're almost out of time, so I wanted to scan through group management real quick. Group management is, groups are a fairly new feature in Office 365. As I mentioned, you can only turn things on or off in group management through PowerShell. And in the slides, which will be made available after this presentation, I actually give you the PowerShell commands needed to disable groups for all users if you want, or enable it for specific users if you want as well. Let's just take a look here. In the Admin Center, there's a section called Groups. And within the groups, I can see all of the groups that have been created for this tenant. And then if I need to, I can administer individual groups by seeing who the members are, editing the Exchange settings, and seeing who the administrator of those different groups are. So for example, I have one that I've created called Doug's Dev. And you can see that it's a private group that only members can see group content. And there's only one person in this group, and it's me. And I'm also the owner. And if I wanted to, I could delete the group from here. But just to give you an idea, because I'm not sure everyone always knows what's included with groups or what that involves. Groups include several things when you create them, and you can think of them like a project or like a team where you're going to work together on things. So when I go into my Outlook for this tenant, you'll see that I've got a section called Groups that I'm a member of. And I'm just going to pull up this Doug's Dev group here just to show you what it looks like. You'll see that there's a section for conversations. It creates a OneDrive for Business section where you can add files, a group calendar where you can share events or whatever you want on the calendar, a OneNote notebook, a planner site, and a SharePoint team site. So these are all created as part of the group, and the group also gets an email inbox as well, so they can share emails. It's a shared email inbox. So it's important as an administrator to be able to sort of govern those groups, because you may not want everyone to be able to create groups. By default, when groups are activated, anyone in your entire tenancy can create a group, and it creates those things that I just showed you for that group for every group that's created. So for every group that's created, a site is created, an email inbox is created. If you want a little more governance around that, I would suggest turning the ability to create groups off for all users, as I do with this PowerShell command here. and then turn it on for a specific set of users who you want to be able to create groups. So maybe you have a request policy to request the ability to create a group for a certain team or project that's coming up, and then someone can create that group for someone and it gets created in a controlled fashion. All right, so I think that's all I want to cover. I did want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. So Julia, I don't know if you've been monitoring if there have been questions or not, but we can certainly open it up to any questions if people have any at this point.
Okay, great. We did have a question about the recording. The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. You guys can access that probably tomorrow morning. It'll be up there. We had a question about the admin audit log and mailbox auditing, and I'm not sure if you can go in depth for that, Doug. If you wanted to show that really quick or not, but we can follow up with John afterwards if you don't have any time to show that really quick. And we did have another
I can follow up with John afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah. There's actually new features that are, it depends on what license you have for admin auditing. And admin auditing is a new feature, so I can follow up with him afterwards with that.
Okay, great. Okay, we do have a question. I have an E3 site. Why is my set of options so significantly less than yours? There's only one user for his site.
Okay, the set of options available in the admin section, I'm presuming, would be the reason you wouldn't see everything there is because you're not a global administrator, I'm guessing. You may be just a SharePoint administrator. And if you're a SharePoint administrator or one of these other administrators, you'll see a reduced set of functions available to you on the left-hand side here. So as a global administrator, I didn't go into all this, but I have access to all of the different admin centers, including Exchange, Skype for Business, SharePoint, and so on. If you're a SharePoint administrator, you'll see a reduced set of functions up here, and you'll only see the SharePoint capabilities here.
Okay, he says that he's the only member of the whole Office 365 tenant.
Well, that I don't know then.
Okay, Mark, we'll have to follow up with you after this.
Yeah.
And then someone else had a question about how to administer search and user profile. Not sure if you can get any more in-depth since we're getting to the top of the hour.
Yeah, if you go into the I just clicked on it here. If you go into the SharePoint Admin Center and click on that, that'll bring you to what is kind of the Office 365 version of Central Administration, which is Central Administration is the website or tool that you use to administer SharePoint on premises. So that you can do that from here. So here's where the search would be. There's the search section where you could administer search. It doesn't have all the same capabilities that you would have on premises, but it's got a lot of the stuff you would see there in a little bit different format. And then user profiles is also listed here. User profiles looks exactly the same, but again, there are some reduced capabilities based on the fact that you're in Office 365 and not on-prem.
Okay, great. I think that is all the questions that we had today. We'll have to follow up with a couple of you about some more in-depth questions that you had. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Thank you, Doug, for the great presentation.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we will see you in 2 weeks when we talk about Nintex Hawkeye. Have a great day, everyone.